Hello and welcome to Longshot Larry's Sports Astrology. Today we're looking at the AFL Grand Final, which is Melbourne Demons versus the Western Bulldogs. Melbourne are slight favourites. It's unusual this year and it's being played at Perth, usually in Melbourne, due to COVID. So let's have a look at the game chart. You can see here Neptune is on the ascendant. It's applying about 1 degree. This time I have here, sometimes it starts a couple of minutes later, so Neptune will probably be closer to the ascendant, and it is retrograde applying to the ascendant. So that's a key influence in this game. Other aspects, let's have a look. So we can see that the moon's going to square Jupiter in about 46 minutes, around half time. You can also see that Mars is applying to Saturn. It's not exact. Saturn is separating from a semi-square to Neptune because Saturn is slowing down to go direct shortly. So they're the main aspects. If we look at the Frawley method, Jupiter rules the ascendant, so the moon is going to square Jupiter in 1 degree. That's 1 for the favourites, Melbourne. The moon is going to trine Pluto in 2 degrees. That's probably 1 for the underdogs. Mercury is not a great deal happening. The moon will quincunx Mercury in about 2.5 degrees, nearly 3 degrees. Mercury rules the descendant. Quincunx is not that strong, but possibly 1 for the underdogs. Let's have a look at the Antisca positions. The only other thing of note in this chart is that Mars, or the Antisca of Mars, which rules a part of fortune, is in the first house. It's applying 3 degrees away, which is fairly wide. It's only just in orb of being an influence, but that's another one for the favourites, Melbourne. So they're the aspects we've got, and that's a summary of the Frawley method. Neptune on the ascendant can be fairy tales, dreams come true, and it's important to note here Melbourne have not won a grand final since 1964, so they are the sentimental favourites. That Neptune semi-square Saturn here, it is separating, but that could be a downer, but we'll see how this plays out. Maybe dreams will come true for long-suffering Melbourne fans. So looking at the teams first of all, we want to see how Neptune plays into these teams. On the inner wing we have Melbourne, and on the outer ring we have the Western Bulldogs. We can see that Neptune here, Melbourne natally has Neptune semi-square Venus, which rules its sun. That's not overly great. You can also see here for Melbourne that Pluto is opposing Mars quite closely, 5 minutes of arc. I've seen that aspect play out quite a lot. It's not a bad aspect as you might think. It's quite an energising aspect. That's probably another one for Melbourne there. If we look at Western Bulldogs, what's interesting here is the part of fortune is at 10 Scorpio 28, maybe a little bit later if we get a slightly later start, a couple of minutes. And it's very closely conjunct Saturn in the Western Bulldogs chart, which is very closely opposing its sun. Also trine Pluto. I don't think that's particularly good for the Western Bulldogs. We also have that Mars-Saturn trine is applying to a trine, or just past a trine to the MC, which is a positive. But that part of fortune is going to be very interesting how that plays out. The moon square Jupiter is in a good degree. It's exactly trine the Jupiter for the Western Bulldogs, which is part of a pattern for them, which is quincunx the moon and square Mercury. Mercury rules the MC, which is a positive. And we'll see how that goes. Alright, looking at the teams. So Melbourne up first. How do they relate to Neptune? Well, Neptune is semi-square the Saturn of the captain, Max Gawn, and he's a Capricorn. So that's a slight irritation for them. Also, I've noted is Saturn is coming back. It's going to station on his Saturn in a few, I think it's about another 8 days before Saturn goes stationary direct. So he's having his Saturn, another Saturn return, and it rules his sun. So that's probably, well, it is a link to Melbourne from Neptune. This moon square Jupiter, how's that influence Melbourne? The captain, you can see that Jupiter is sextile his Mars, which is a nice aspect. So the moon is going to trigger that Jupiter sextile Mars, and that's first half, so they should have a good first half. Also, that Mars trine Saturn would generally be good for Capricorns, and if you look at both the charts here, the captain is a Capricorn and the coach Simon Goodwin is also a Capricorn, so that's another positive for them. How does the Moon Jupiter link into the coach, Simon Goodwin? Well, the Moon's trine his Mercury. He has a Mercury trine Jupiter natally. It doesn't link back to his Sun, so we don't know whether that's a success symbol or not. It is a good aspect. And he's also got the part of fortune exactly conjunct Uranus here. How does that link into him? Well, his Uranus is semi-square Mars natally, which is a volatile aspect. He's also got Mercury applying to a sextile to his Mars. Okay, if we look back at the Neptune for Simon Goodwin, we can see how does he relate to Neptune. His Neptune's up here at 14 Sag, and it's trine his Saturn. Now I think this is important because Saturn rules his Capricorn Sun, so he's got a nice trine from Neptune to Saturn. We also have that Neptune semi-square Saturn, so we should relate quite well to that Neptune on the ascendant, so they look pretty good. Let's have a look at the Western Bulldogs. Okay, how do they relate to Neptune? So we've got the coach, Luke Beveridge, on the inner ring, and we've got the captain, Marcus Bontempelli, on the outer ring. So the coach, first of all, Neptune's not making any exact aspects to him. It's past a quincunx to Mars. Natally, his Sun at 29 Leo is square Neptune. So Neptune is going to be a challenge for Luke Beveridge today. The Moon square Jupiter. Well, the Moon's exactly on his Saturn at the start, 4 minutes away. And Saturn natally is square his Mars. So this is a huge challenge for the Western Bulldogs to overcome today. Mars is an exalted ruler of the Sun. So this is a big challenge. So it's forming a T-square pointing to his Saturn. Not what you would really want going into a final. The other aspect he has is Mars is going to cross over his Uranus during the game. So how does his Uranus link in? Well, his Uranus is semi-square his Mars and sesquiquadrate his Saturn. Another challenging aspect. So a lot of challenges for the Western Bulldogs coach today. The captain, Marcus Bontempelli, Neptune is applying to a square to his Jupiter, and you can see he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets in Sagittarius, so Jupiter's a pretty important planet for him, including his Sun. So the square there is another challenge for them to overcome. That's the main things I can see with the Western Bulldogs. There's not a great deal going on with the progressions. So let's have a look at the end of the game. Here's the end of the game. You can see Pluto is going to be crossing over the MC. It might finish a little bit later than this. And Mercury is going to be coming down to the descendant. So how do the teams line up with that? The Moon is it's a fair way away from Pluto, still 40 minutes away, so not exact. Okay, so Melbourne, you can see that Pluto is opposing Mars right at the end. Also interesting is that the Moon is going to be applying to the IC. The Moon is an indication of the fans, and the Moon's quite well placed. Natally, the Moon is trine Uranus and Saturn, so that could be some excitement for long-suffering Melbourne fans. The Western Bulldogs Mercury is past the ascendant. We've got Chiron coming up there. Doesn't mean a great deal. That's it for them. Okay, let's have a look at the teams. So the Melbourne team, how do they line up? This Mercury here is sextile the Mars of the coach, which is helpful. There's not a great deal else going on. That Mercury Jupiter trine is crossing a little bit before the end, so that's the main thing there, which looks okay. And now the Western Bulldogs. Mercury is conjunct the node for Luke Beveridge, that's quite good. However, his south node is potentially on the ascendant. The captain has his Neptune Uranus crossing over the MC. Uranus natally is widely sextile the Sun, which is helpful, but pretty even, I would say, looking at both of them at the end of the game. So let's go over what we've got. So this Neptune on the ascendant is probably going to be a determining factor. Moon will be squaring Jupiter during the game. Mercury stationary direct in 2 days. I don't think it's applicable for this game. Mars is applying to Saturn. It won't be exact. Will that Neptune be a fairy tale win for Melbourne, the sentimental favourites? That semi-square to Saturn is important there, but it is separating, which is probably helpful for the sentimental team, Melbourne. Frawley method is pretty inconclusive here, maybe a slight edge to the favourites. So Melbourne do have links to their suns from that Neptune. It's not overly positive. It is linking to the ruler of the sun for the first game. It's trine the Saturn for the coach, and it's lined up with the Saturn which rules the sun for the captain, Max Gawn. So they do have sun, 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 which I like. The Western Bulldogs, well, they've got a lot of squares I've written here. So they do have a part of fortune at the start is conjunct the Saturn opposite the sun. I don't like that. The coach has that challenge from his natal Mars square Saturn, which is a challenge. And the captain also has a Neptune squaring his ruling planet. So they have, I think Western Bulldog have a lot of challenges here. They are the slight underdog, but they have been the underdogs back in 2016. They still won. Overall, I think those challenges will probably just be a bit too much for Western Bulldogs, and I think Melbourne will get the win here. So thanks for watching. Please like, make a comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.